and we're talking about Ron DeSantis. Now, as always, with every article that we're talking about or any YouTube video that we're referring to, links are all in description if you want to go and check those things out at all. But let's talk about DeSantis. DeSantis was recently on a podcast with Patrick Bet-Davies on the PBD podcast. PBD, he's a great interviewer. The way he's able to show respect and still challenge people, I think is really good. And obviously he comes from a place of a lot of wisdom and stuff like that. So if you haven't checked out the PBD podcast, go and check it out. It's on Valuetainment. Go check on our Valuetainment. Doing great things in content. Now, Ron DeSantis, he was interviewing Ron DeSantis and talking about, the Trump effect on his campaign, that Trump endorsed him to first be, voted in as governor, elected as governor, and Trump, what's the word? Endorsed him. I know I just said the word, but it left me for a moment. Trump endorsed him, and there's all this saying that Trump wouldn't have, without Trump, he wouldn't have won and everything like that. And Ron DeSantis was just talking through this scenario of like, well, originally Trump supported him, but Trump used to really sing his praises and do everything like that. And then now Trump is talking him down, bagging him out, telling him he's doing a bad job and everything like that. Yet Trump and his whole family live in Florida. They moved to Florida because obviously, he created a great environment. The state, when it was going through COVID, was the one that got some of the best results, as far as economic results, and there's just endless things that there's proof that Ron DeSantis is good, but Donald Trump is just attacking him. Now, I know I said at the opener, Trump is one of those people that does tend to just flip flop, just say whatever comes out of his mind, actually probably not out of his mind. It's first words out of his mouth, which I don't think sometimes go through his mind, go through his brain. So let's take him kind of out of this situation, because it is kind of a bad example that he does this. But let's say a leader, is it possible for a leader to change their opinion about someone or something without then being voted a contradiction, or you don't walk the walk, you're lying about things or whatever? So is it possible for a leader to change their mind?
Sure. And I think most of us do from time to time. And I think the best way to approach that is to be able to lay out the reasons why you've made that change. Mm-hmm. It seems to me that the rules of the game are pretty different in politics. And that's one reason why I don't like what I see in politics. Mm-hmm. I don't like it at all. I don't like the name calling. I just don't like the way politics is done, because far too much of it is based on the person, not their policies, not their values, and so on. And I think that's to the detriment of Western civilization. So I don't like it at all.
Now, before you get on to your thought, I'll just jump on that. And I think that while we're not a political podcast, like we're not a political podcast, we're a leadership podcast talking about leadership things. But I think that's why we have so many examples from the political realm, is because they just do things differently. And from my opinion, they make a lot of mistakes from a leadership perspective. So I think that they kind of like are very public, very open examples of what not to do. So yes, I agree. Now onto your point, Dr. Rod.
Well, look, I think the way in which Ron DeSantis handled the question was very good, except that I really think his response should have been, well, we don't really know whether Donald Trump's endorsement actually delivered that tiny majority of votes. He won by something like 38,000 votes the first time he stood for the governorship. So it's a very, very narrow win. Look, frankly, I don't know how you could make a judgment about whether or not the endorsement from Trump made the difference that actually got him into office in the first place. But certainly his resounding success next time he was voted in with a majority of well over 1.1 million. And I think that was pretty clearly based on his policies.
Yeah.
And so, I think you could argue that fairly strongly. But look, I felt he was very measured in his response. He didn't stoop to name calling, which I think is that's an honourable way of approaching it. Bet David is an excellent interviewer, as you said. I found that whole interview very, very interesting and informative too, because I learned more about Ron DeSantis. So, you talked about Donald Trump and his flip-flopping. Look, I think he's a very smart person, and he achieved a lot in office, and he's just not generally accorded the recognition for what he achieved. He achieved more in one term than most presidents of the United States have ever achieved, and most of them wind up with 2 terms. And certainly, I would say, he's been the most successful president, probably in 2 decades. But I do think although he's very, very smart, he probably needs a little bit more wisdom. And I think his lack of wisdom cost the Republicans the majority in the Senate. And so I think in some ways he can be blamed for some of the issues that have emerged in politics in the United States. But in terms of flip-flopping, in terms of changing our mind, I've done it, but generally after a long period of reflection. And I might add, usually because I've listened to a voice of dissent.
Explain.
And that's why I love dissenters. Well, if you don't have dissenters, if there's no one's ever going to speak up and offer an alternative, then I don't think organisations can change. They really can't progress, and they'll ultimately shrivel and die. So I don't think we should ever be afraid of dissent. Sure, there are some people who make a habit of dissent, that's how they form their identity. I don't think those kinds of people are all that helpful to you as a leader. But someone who's actually going to say, hang on a minute, I don't agree with that and here's why, I think that kind of dissent is to be welcomed. And I believe a good leader will take that dissent and will reflect on it. They'll do their research, and if it becomes clear that they do need to change their position, then they should, and they should explain why.
Yeah. So, as a bit of a leadership lesson, like that's a really good point. Is like, don't surround yourself with yes men. Like,
the other thing I would say is, don't bother using politicians as your role models. Just generally speaking, they're not good role models for leaders, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Certainly not what they do in public. What happens behind closed doors might be different. But I just wouldn't say to leaders, look, go and have a look at how a whole lot of presidents and prime ministers and ministers and all that sort of stuff act and build your leadership model on that. I'd just say, no, forget it. You're wasting your time. There are better models to follow.
They're playing a different game to us.
Well, I think they are.
They're playing a different game. So, yeah, look, we as leaders shouldn't surround ourselves by yes men. Like we should have some people that have authority, like yourself, Dr. Rod, like and my board are people that you regularly correct me on things. Sometimes even on this podcast, you'll do it, right? And I open that so I know where that comes from. I know that I've given you authority to do that. You can speak into my life and correct me on anything that I'm doing. And that's important for us to have. If we just surround ourselves with yes men or think that we just have all the answers and just ignore and any negative comment that we get is just haters, then we're missing valuable learnings. We're missing opportunities to grow and to change. But can we change our mind over time? Yeah. But like you said, it needs to be a thought out process. It needs to be a well-educated, well-informed process. And over time, I think that we as leaders shouldn't jump on bandwagons. If we rather than, and I'm not even just let's go back, rather than changing our minds, before we set our mind against something, make sure that it's not just setting our mind, jumping on a bandwagon, not just jumping on, setting our mind, jumping on the next fad or whatever. Once again, let's be considered in our decision to the decision we make, or what we stand for, or what we like, or what we believe, but also just as considered when we change our mind. And so it is okay for us as leaders to change our mind. How do we avoid, when we change our mind, seeming like people that are just flip-flopping, or people go back to a post we did 5 years ago or 10 years ago and go, well, see, you're saying something different. How do we go through that process of changing our mind and our opinion while still not appearing like we're just chasing a fad, or we're just, just changing our mind and people can't rely on what we say?
Well, I think it gets down to knowing what your position is and why you hold that position. And if you know why you hold a position, then you can be quite clear in terms of how you came to change that position. And basically, look, I think if you take that approach, you really won't be doing a lot of flip-flopping.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. We need to be very careful about simply joining whatever fad happens to be happening. Yeah. We read an article in the Harvard Business Review, for example, and say, right, that's the way to go from now on. Then in a few months' time, you read another article and say, oops, no, we're going to change. I don't think that's a really good basis for leadership, and we can get into the sort of politics of academic writing too sometime if you like. But look, I mean, the very term flip-flop kind of implies that it's something that you're doing, regularly, that it's part of your personal style, so to speak. I think that is something to be avoided as a leader. I think it's best for a leader to be somebody who is considered to be the kind of person who takes what you offer seriously, who weighs it up, who reflects on it, and if change appears to be something which is sensible, then you change your mind.
Yeah.
So I would say that for most leaders, flip-flopping should be rare, but it's something that they should do from time to time as they get better knowledge, as they gain wisdom from experience and from listening to what others are saying.
Yeah. And to kind of follow up on that, or kind of reaffirm what you're saying, is when we do change our mind, one thing I remember thinking back to the time when I used to coach professional speakers, and we'd coach people how to present from stage and how to share your message, and we'd talk about sharing a testimony of what caused you to believe in whatever it was that you're selling or you're pitching or whatever, and understand that you took a process to make that decision. You can't expect everyone else to just be on board just because you say so now. And so as leaders, you may change your mind or change your beliefs on something. And let's even look at directly running an organization. You may be looking at presenting, you may run your operations a particular way. And you've been thinking about a new process or changing the operations for a while, and you've been doing some research, and you've been watching podcasts and reading some books or whatever, or gone to a conference, and then now you're at a point where you're like, yes, I now know how we're going to change the way we operate our company. And so you go in the next day and tell everyone, this is the way we're doing it. Well, you're going to put a lot of people offside, probably lose a lot of great leaders, lose a lot of great employees, because they're not going to be on board with it just because you come in and say, right, we're going this way now. So if we change our view and opinion on something, remember, when we share it with others, we need to allow them to go through that same process. And so one thing we used to teach professional speakers is take people on that journey. When you're presenting people, when you're proposing something to your team, to a board, to potential customers or whatever, if you're looking at helping them believe what you believe, then you need to make sure that you're allowing them to go on that journey, and you take them through kind of, we call it like a bit of a montage of the process that you went through and some of those key moments and key thoughts, so that then they can have a rapid process to get to that same point as well with you, if that's, if they're on board. So that'll be my suggestion, is if you do change your mind, don't just come out and go, this is what I believe now. explain your process, explain that you've gone through things, because even if you're not going to change someone's mind with it, people can see that you as a leader, they've gone through a process of doing this. And remember, as a leader, you're an influencer. You influence people, and they may not be on board with what you say right now, but they will capture like, when I go to make a decision, that person didn't just tell me their decision. They told me that they went through this massive thought process. Next time I need to make a decision, I'm going to go through that same thought process as well. So while you're maybe helping people change their mind and believe what you believe, you're also helping people become better decision makers themselves because you've shared the journey that you're on as well. Hey, you just watched an excerpt from the On the Cube Leadership Podcast. If you like that, hit the like button and put a comment below. Hey, if you want to watch more videos like this, check out our channel, and while you're there, make sure you subscribe.